Have you ever seen a dog, normally so loyal and happy, suddenly become silent and start to growl, refusing to enter a house? Do you believe that some spirits wander not out of hatred, but because of a mother's love distorted by despair? And if a child is called by name in the middle of the night, by a voice that only they can hear, would you dare to believe it's just their imagination? Welcome back to the Whisper Horror Channel, where scary stories whisper in your ear when you think you're finally asleep. If you like chilling stories like this one, be sure to hit like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single terrifying whisper in the night. In today's episode, we invite you to step into an old cabin in the middle of the Colorado forest where a small family intended to stay for just 3 days, but instead they awakened a spirit that had been waiting for many years, and the first one to feel its presence wasn't human. August arrives in Colorado with slow, long and quiet stretches of sunlight. The sky, high above the San Juan Mountains, looks like a painting untouched by time, and the pine forest, which has been whispering the same voice for 1,000 years, now welcomes 3 people and a dog. The Granger family left the city of Denver early that morning, packing the trunk with enough camping gear, sleeping bags, canned food, and simple hopes for one last vacation before Lily started 3rd grade. Michael was behind the wheel, his eyes calm, but with the quiet joy of a father who loves the forest. Rachel, gentle as always, had a small notebook on her lap, occasionally writing something down about the passing scenery. In the back seat, Lily was telling an imaginary story to Bruno, a large, 3-colored Bernese mountain dog, whose deep eyes seemed to be listening intently. They arrived at the cabin late in the afternoon. The small log house was nestled under old trees, with its back to the mountain and its front facing a gravel path. The roof was covered in gray moss, the porch was full of dry leaves, and the windows were like old, half-closed eyes looking into the forest. The moment Michael opened the car door, Bruno froze. He didn't growl, didn't whimper. He just stood still, his paws dug firmly into the gravel. He wasn't looking at his owners or the road. He was staring at the cabin's doorway, as if he saw something that didn't belong in this world. A sudden loud and echoing bark shattered the strangely peaceful atmosphere. Michael frowned. Rachel called his name softly, but Bruno wouldn't move. He took a few steps back, his fur standing on end, and barked again. This time, it was long and hoarse. It took several minutes of gentle persuasion and coaxing with a bag of his favorite treats before Bruno finally agreed to cross the threshold. But as soon as he was inside, he only made it to the foot of the stairs before lying down. He stayed away from every dark corner, away from the cold fireplace and the silent rooms. He didn't whimper or howl, but his eyes never left the window looking out at the forest, where the sunlight was fading and the wind was starting to pick up. Lily entered the house with the pure joy of a city kid experiencing nature for the first time. She took off her shoes, ran upstairs to find a bedroom, pulled the curtains, and squealed with delight at a bed with a striped blanket, just like in a cartoon. Rachel smiled, calling Lily down to help unpack. Michael checked the fireplace and windows, his eyes still glancing over at Bruno. "He's just getting used to a new place," he said. "He'll get over it." But Bruno didn't react. He lay still, his eyes open, and his ears perked. Bruno was acting strangely. He wasn't sticking close to his little owner as usual, nor was he running around exploring the house like he did in other new places. He just lay motionless at the foot of the stairs, his eyes wide open, staring intently at the front door. His ears were constantly perked up, as if listening for some sound that others couldn't hear. Whenever the wind rustled through the forest, or a branch tapped lightly against the porch, his whole body would tense up, and his eyes would immediately dart toward the sound. Even when Lily brought him his food bowl, Bruno's eyes never left the door. He ate, but slowly and in stops and starts, constantly lifting his head, vigilant, as if he feared something might rush in at any moment. Rachel looked at Michael and whispered, "I've never seen him like this before." Michael shook his head, trying to smile. The forest probably has some strange smells, wolves for example, but in Bruno's eyes, which were glowing in the grayish-yellow light of the sunset from the window, there was no fear. It was the tension of a guard, ready to sound the alarm if anything out of the ordinary occurred. Dinner passed with light conversation and the sound of forks clinking on ceramic plates. After Lily was allowed to look at a few pages of a comic book and went to bed early, Michael walked around the cabin to check everything. He checked the front door, turning the knob twice before locking it. The back door was bolted securely, and all the ground-level windows were tightly shut. The old house was sturdy, There were no signs of anything unusual. Rachel stood at the top of the stairs, waiting for him to return. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. Michael nodded. "Yeah, I'll just check on Lily one last time, then I'll be in." Lily was already in bed, tucked under the striped blanket that was in the room. Bruno was lying at the foot of the bed, but he wasn't relaxed. His eyes were open, looking toward the window by the headboard, where the curtains had been drawn since the afternoon. Michael walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. "Sleep well, my love," he said softly. "Mom and Dad are right here. You can call us any time if you need anything." Lily nodded, pulling the blanket up higher. "I know, but Bruno isn't sleeping, Dad." Michael looked at the dog. He was still lying motionless, his head resting on his front paws, his ears slightly perked. Michael stroked his head, then leaned down and gave Lily a light kiss on her forehead. "Let him stand guard for you. Now go to sleep." Rachel also came by, tucking a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. They closed the bedroom door, leaving it slightly ajar. The faint glow of the nightlight shone out into the hallway. Downstairs they lit a candle, opened a small bottle of wine, and sat close to each other. The space was so quiet, with only the sounds of the forest filtering through the gaps in the wooden planks. The barking started around midnight. It wasn't like the barking from that afternoon. This time, it was louder and more determined, as if Bruno had seen something specific. Michael was the first to jump up and hurry to the stairs. Rachel followed right behind him. Lily's bedroom door was wide open. The nightlight was still on. Bruno was standing pressed against the window, his front legs rigid, his head pointed directly at the closed curtain. He was barking in short, sharp bursts, his throat hoarse and strained. Michael rushed over and pulled Lily out of bed. "What's wrong, honey?" Lily rubbed her eyes and shook her head. "I don't know, I was sleeping when Bruno suddenly got up and started barking. I didn't see anything." Rachel walked closer to Bruno. He was still barking, but when she placed a hand on his shoulder, Bruno took a step back, turned his head to look at them, and gave a very faint whimper. His whole body trembled slightly, as if he were under great stress. Michael pulled back the window curtain and looked outside. There was only thick darkness out there, nothing moving. They tried to calm Bruno down. He eventually stopped barking, but his eyes never left the window. Rachel sat down next to Lily. "It's okay, honey. It was probably just the wind making the trees rub against the glass." Michael wasn't so sure. He sat down next to the dog, placing a hand on his back. Bruno's heart was beating fast, a powerful, abnormal thumping. He wasn't scared, but he was ready. Daylight came slowly. The first rays of sun peeked over the mountain ridge, sneaking into the cabin through the narrow gaps in the curtains, painting faint streaks of light on the wooden floor. The wind was still cold, and the mist hadn't completely cleared. The forest was strangely quiet, as if it hadn't fully woken up yet. Michael was the first to get up. He quietly made coffee with their small portable pot, the steam curling up in the kitchen, which still smelled of the previous night's wood ash. Rachel followed, tying her hair back with a faded elastic band, leaning against the kitchen doorway. "Did you sleep?" she asked softly. Michael shook his head. "Not much. You?" "Not really. I just had this feeling, like I was being watched." They were both silent for a few seconds. Then Rachel shook her head and poured herself some coffee. A little later, Lily came down from upstairs. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt, her eyes still sleepy, with Bruno walking close beside her like a shadow. The dog was calmer now, and no longer barking, but he didn't leave Lily's side. Rachel knelt down to pet Bruno's back and asked softly, "What happened last night, honey?" Lily sat down in a chair. At first Bruno was barking a lot, but then he just sat guarding the window. "I was so tired I fell back asleep without even realizing it." Michael asked quietly, "Do you remember anything else strange?" "No, but I think Bruno knew there was really something out there." Michael nodded faintly, not saying anything more. The family had a simple breakfast of fried eggs, toast, and fruit. Bruno still didn't eat much, but he was quiet and no longer growling. Around 9 in the morning, the Granger family left the cabin with fishing rods, a small box of bait, and a few bottles of water, following a stone-paved trail down to a nearby stream. It was a small tributary of the Piedra River, with clear, cool water flowing over moss-covered rocks. Michael showed Lily how to bait her hook, while Rachel sat on a large rock in the shade, reading a small notebook and occasionally reminding them to avoid stepping on the delicate moss. Bruno ran along the bank, occasionally dipping his nose into the stream and startling when the water splashed him. He was back to being a friendly, affectionate dog, but every time he turned his head to look at the cabin up the hill, his eyes changed, becoming cold and alert. Lily laughed happily when she reeled in a small fish. Michael whistled in approval. Rachel took a picture with the old camera she'd brought along. After their fishing session, the family took the fish back to the cabin, put them in a bucket of water, and changed their clothes. They grabbed a large canvas bag and started exploring the edge of the forest, with the goal of picking mushrooms and identifying some native plants. Rachel was excited. She had studied ecology in college and could identify some common mushroom species. Lily followed her mum's lead, eagerly picking up strange twigs, leaves with unusual spots, or small crimson berries. Michael was noting their path, occasionally marking it with a piece of parachute cord tied to a low branch. Bruno walked beside Lily, sniffing at the base of every tree and listening whenever he heard a strange sound. He wasn't barking, but he wasn't completely at ease either. As evening fell, they returned and prepared a small barbecue on the wooden porch. Michael cleaned the fish, Rachel prepped the mushrooms and vegetables, and Lily set the table and got the drinks ready. The fire crackled, and smoke billowed with each gust of wind. They ate under the old trees, with the light filtering through the leaves and the distant hum of forest cicadas all around. For the first time since they had arrived, the cabin felt like a real vacation spot. Bruno lay with his head resting on Lily's feet, his eyes half closed, but whenever a strange sound echoed from the forest, like the wind, a snapping branch, or a bird taking flight, he would raise his head, his eyes fixed on the cabin behind him, and each time his tail would slightly droop. No one noticed. As night fell, it grew colder than the night before. After cleaning up, the family gathered in the living room. Michael turned on the fireplace and added more dry wood. Rachel brought some cookies and a thin blanket. Lily sat curled up in her mom's lap, absent-mindedly scratching Bruno's back. Michael suddenly said, "Want to hear a ghost story?" Lily giggled, and Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Don't scare her too much. It's a light one," Michael reassured, then turned to his daughter. "Ready?" Lily nodded, pulling the blanket up higher. Bruno lay at her feet, his head resting on her lap. Michael began to tell the story in an even, punctuated tone. A long time ago, in this forest, a woman lived alone in a log house. One winter night she went into the forest and never came back. People say that if the wind whistles through the trees like a call, it's her trying to find her way home. Clack! A soft cracking sound came from the kitchen. Rachel jumped and turned around. Michael was silent for a few seconds, then continued. "They say, if anyone accidentally looks into her eyes, they'll never sleep peacefully again." Clack, clack, thump. This time, it was the sound of something falling from upstairs. Bruno jumped up, letting out a low growl from his throat. Without waiting, he lunged toward the stairs and let out a howl. It was a long, dry and bone-chilling sound. Bruno's head was low, his fur was standing on end, and his eyes were wide and red. He was looking at the top of the stairs as if something was waiting there. Michael stood up immediately. "It's probably just the wind knocking something over." But Bruno wouldn't obey. He spun around the room, barking frantically, then ran toward Lily. He started to lick her feet constantly and frantically, then tried to use his head to push her off the chair, as if he wanted her to get away from that place. Rachel hugged Lily. "What is going on?" No one could answer. Michael checked the entire downstairs. Nothing. He lowered his voice, trying to soothe Bruno and quiet his barking, but it was useless. In the end, he had to herd Bruno into the living room and close the door so Lily could sleep. Rachel carried her daughter upstairs. "Bruno's probably just agitated. Maybe it's a rat or something in the attic." Lily didn't say anything, just nodded. She looked tired, but her eyes were still open when she was placed in bed. Rachel pulled the blanket up, kissed her daughter's forehead, then left the room after setting the nightlight to a dim setting. The door closed. Bruno was downstairs, but he was still growling non-stop. Around 2 in the morning, Lily woke up. The room was silent, with only the soft sound of wind seeping through the window cracks. But for some reason she felt uneasy. Something was calling her name. "Lily." The voice wasn't loud or clear, but it was very close, as if it were coming from inside her head. She sat up, her heart pounding. The nightlight was still on. Everything was in its place. But, "Lily, open the door for me." Lily turned her head. The window. She got out of bed, her bare feet ice cold on the wooden floor. Slowly she pulled back the curtain. Outside, a few feet from the cabin, was a woman. She had long flowing hair and a white dress stained with dirt, standing in the middle of the forest as if she had grown out of the ground. Her face was unclear, but her gaunt, motionless posture froze Lily in place. And then, thud, the face vanished in a flash, leaving only a gaping dark space. Thump, Two pale hands with long fingernails slammed hard against the window glass from the outside. A face appeared right against the glass. The eyes were pitch black and hollow, the mouth was wide and lipless, and the skin on her face was wrinkled and cracked. Her eyes didn't blink. They just stared straight at Lily. The little girl screamed. Bruno howled ferociously downstairs, then charged up the stairs, but he stopped right in front of the bedroom door, unable to get in, even though it was only slightly ajar. He growled and barked furiously, as if he were confronting something blocking the way. Rachel opened the door. Bruno rushed in, immediately ran to Lily's bed, barked a series of times at the window, then stood in front of the little girl, shielding her. Michael pulled back the curtain and looked out. There was only the forest. Nothing was there. Lily sat trembling in her mother's arms. There was a woman. She was looking at me. Her face. I didn't imagine it. Michael sat down, gently stroking his daughter's hair. I believe you, but maybe you were just tired and saw things. We'll leave the light on brighter tomorrow, okay? Rachel looked at Michael, her eyes worried, but she didn't dare to say anything. They decided to let Bruno sleep in Lily's room tonight. Bruno didn't sleep. He sat at the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed on the window, his ears perked. He didn't whimper, he didn't howl, he just waited. The sky was overcast from early morning. No sunlight pierced through the leaves, just a layer of grey clouds spread evenly over the pine forest, like a heavy blanket covering the space. The air was damp, and the smell of earth was stronger than usual. The Granger family decided to take a break from the cabin and visit a small museum about a 20-minute drive away. It was an old log building in the southwestern style, which housed many artifacts and photos about the history of the town and the surrounding forest areas. Rachel took Lily to look at the ancient stone tools, while Michael stayed in the area displaying the first settlers. As the family was looking at an old photo of a group of people standing in front of a wooden cabin, an older man approached them. He was tall, wearing a thin black robe, with a solemn expression on his face. "Excuse me, could I ask you a question?" he said, looking at Michael. His voice was low and soft, but there was something about it that made a listener not dare to interrupt. Michael nodded. "Which part of the forest did you say you were staying in?" Michael pointed at the photo of the cabin. "We rented a place very close to here, a small old-style cabin near the Piedra River." The man froze. His eyes changed noticeably. The cabin, behind the gravel slope, with a sloped roof and a long wooden porch. Michael was a little surprised. "Yes, that's the one. You know the place?" The man didn't answer right away. He looked down, reached into his coat pocket, took out a piece of paper, wrote down a phone number, and handed it to Michael. "I am a priest. My name is Father Elias. If anything strange happens, at any time call me. Don't try to explain it yourself." Michael took the paper and nodded politely, but he just thought it was a strange encounter. Rachel gave a light thank you and pulled Lily away. Michael put the paper in his coat pocket and didn't think about it anymore. "That was weird," Rachel whispered in the parking lot. "He probably lives near there. He's old, so it's understandable that he's a little superstitious." Michael replied, "We're leaving tomorrow anyway." They didn't say anything more. That evening, it got dark early. The family had a simple dinner in the cabin. The wind was stronger than the previous nights, making the trees outside sway and hit the porch like continuous footsteps. Michael sat near the fireplace, swirling a glass of wine. Rachel sat close to Lily on the couch. Bruno lay under the dining table, breathing steadily. "We didn't finish the story from the other night," Michael said, his voice light. "It would be a waste not to tell a scary story in a place like this." Rachel gave a weak laugh. "As long as you don't keep her awake again." Michael started telling the story again, this time in a deeper voice. It was still about the woman who got lost in the forest, but now she had found her way home. He described her face. No eyes, just two dark sockets, sagging skin, tangled hair, and hands with nails that reached her wrists. When he got to the part where she was following the scent of blood to get into a living person's house, a clack-clack sound of something hitting the window echoed from upstairs. The whole family fell silent. Michael stopped telling the story. Bruno had jumped up from under the table, growling. Rachel stood up. "I'll go check." But just as she turned around, a blast of icy cold wind blew through the entire cabin. The fireplace went out as if someone had blown on it. The front door burst open, even though it was locked. A white figure zipped through the doorway like mist. Michael was slammed against the wall. The impact was so hard that the chair he was in broke apart. He groaned, clutching his shoulder. Rachel was lifted off the ground, her throat constricted, her legs flailing wildly.
The wind howled. Lily screamed, running toward her mum. The woman appeared right in front of them, her face hideous, her skin bruised and black, her teeth cracked, and her nails long and curved. "The girl must come with me," Bruno roared. He lunged straight at her body, snarling, and bit her arm with all his might. A painful howl rang out. It wasn't Bruno, it was something else. The room shook. Things fell and broke. The wind swirled in circles. Bruno kept biting, giving it everything he had. The ghost faltered, released Rachel, and backed away as if being pushed out of the house. And then, everything went quiet. Rachel fell to the floor, coughing violently. Michael crawled over and held her. Lily ran to Bruno. The dog was breathing heavily, his whole body shaking, with blood trickling from his mouth. Lily hugged him tightly, sobbing, "Bruno, don't go. I'm sorry." Michael held his wife and daughter, all three of them trembling together in the dark. They decided to leave the cabin that very night. Michael grabbed the luggage. Rachel wrapped a blanket around Lily and carried Bruno. But when they opened the door, it was pitch black outside. In the distance, at the edge of the forest, a ghostly white figure of a woman stood silently, not moving, not taking her eyes off them. Michael pressed the car key. There was no sound. He tried again. Useless. The lights wouldn't turn on. The car was completely dead. "We can't stay here any longer," Rachel said, panicked. Lily suddenly spoke, almost whispering, "Dad, call the priest." Michael stopped, then pulled his phone out of his jacket pocket. He dialed the number. It rang only once. "Michael Granger." Father Elias's voice answered immediately, as if he had been waiting for the call. "We need you, right now. 10 minutes. The priest replied. "Don't let anyone leave the porch." Michael looked out at the forest. The white figure was still standing there.
10 minutes after the call ended, an old silver pickup truck sped to the top of the slope. The headlights pierced through the thin mist. Father Elias stepped out, holding a black wooden cross, with an old leather bag slung over his shoulder. His clothes were covered in mud, but his eyes were bright and determined. Rachel burst into tears as soon as she opened the door and saw him. "Thank God you're here." Elias said nothing, just gave a slight nod. He looked at Bruno, who was lying in Lily's arms. The dog was breathing weakly, his eyes half closed, but he was still alive. Michael helped Rachel inside. Elias followed, closed the door, then sat down near the fireplace. He took out a cloth bundle, which contained an old Bible, some ash, holy oil, and a few juniper branches. "Before I begin," he said slowly, "you need to understand why this is happening." The room fell silent. There was only the gentle sound of rain on the porch and Bruno's wheezing breath. Elias looked at the extinguished fireplace, then began to tell the story. "This cabin once belonged to a family. They were just like you, a husband and wife, with a little girl. But that man was not like Michael. He was cruel. He would often beat his wife. I once heard he locked her out on the porch on a snowy night, just because her dinner was cold. The daughter was about 8 years old. I used to see her. She was so small, her eyes always red from crying. One day, the little girl disappeared from the town. No one could find her. The wife left the house to go looking for her. Many people said they saw her wandering in the forest for many nights, calling her daughter's name, walking barefoot in the snow. 3 weeks later, they found her body. It was frozen solid, wedged between 2 rocks deep in a ravine. But Elias looked up. Her spirit never left. Rachel hugged Lily tighter. Michael looked at the floor, speechless. The husband later put the cabin up for sale. No one would buy it. In the end, a real estate company bought it and turned it into a vacation rental. "She's not here to harm people," Elias continued. "She's here to wait for her child to return. But now her mind is confused. Every time a little girl comes to this house, she thinks it's her child. And if a spirit isn't put to rest, over time, it becomes something else." Michael clenched his fists. "So, last night, she was trying to take Lily." Elias nodded. "And I'm not going to lie to you. If it weren't for that dog, I'm afraid I wouldn't have made it here in time." He stood up, slinging the bag over his shoulder. "She's been weakened. I can perform an exorcism, but it has to happen in the forest, where she died. I'm going now. Stay here. Lock the doors tight. No one is to go outside." Michael was about to say something, but Elias had already left, walking into the forest, his back disappearing into the mist and the cold wind. It was dawn. Elias returned when the sky was still a hazy gray. His robe was torn, his hands were bleeding, and his forehead was covered in a cold sweat. He entered the cabin, placed the cross on the table, and then collapsed into a chair, breathing heavily. "It's done," he said softly. Michael put a hand on his shoulder. "You're hurt. It's not bad, but she was stronger than I thought. If Bruno hadn't weakened her last night, I wouldn't have been able to hold her off long enough to complete the ritual." He turned to look at the dog lying by the fireplace, his head resting on Lily's feet. "That animal is as brave as a warrior." Lily leaned down, pressing her face into his warm fur that was still breathing. Rachel put her arms around her daughter's shoulders, her eyes red. Elias slowly stood up. "Take me and Bruno to the hospital. We'll deal with the rest later." Michael nodded. Without another word, he put on his coat and opened the door. For the first time in 3 days, the morning light shone through the trees unobstructed. The cabin behind them was finally quiet. Sometimes, spirits don't stay behind to harm anyone. They just don't know they've been lost for too long. Love, if it's not let go of, can become a chain that binds both the living and the dead. And sometimes, the bravest person in the dark isn't a human at all. If this story gave you chills, or made your heart ache at the end, don't forget to like, share and comment with your thoughts down below. What do you think of Bruno? Do you believe in an animal's intuition? See you again on the Whisper Horror channel in the coming nights, where every story is a thin scratch that lasts all the way to your dreams. And if your dog stares out the window tonight without barking, maybe try looking with them. Maybe someone is waiting to be noticed.